All right, thanks, Brigham. It's now my privilege to introduce our speaker. So, Scott Sanders is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology here at BYU. He earned a bachelor's degree in international politics from BYU and then attended Cornell University for graduate school, where he earned not only a master's and PhD in development sociology, but something I didn't know, also a master's in public administration. Right? So he may win the award for most degrees in the room. Anyway, he's an active and widely published scholar in the areas of rural inequalities, healthcare access, globalization, labor standards, and monitoring and evaluations. And I should also note that he is the director of the Project Evaluation and Assessment Team, or PEAT, which is a joint program between the Sociology Department and the International Development Program in the Kennedy Center. I will also say, in addition to these professional qualifications and accomplishments, Scott is my neighbor and a friend, and he's a terrific neighbor, and also, I should say, an excellent cyclist as well. So that's another important qualification. But I'm really excited for this project. And so please join me in welcoming to the Kennedy Center Scott Sanders.
Thank you, Stan, and thank you for everyone coming out today. So I just want to quickly recognize my co-authors, Michael Cope in the background, and Turin, I thought I saw her earlier. Oh, they're right up front, nice. And thank the Kennedy Center for funding this. This is a really cool project, I think. This has been really fun for me, and I'm excited to be able to share this with you. And as we go through this today, I want to, first of all, give you a background, show you how I got from doing research on human trafficking and sweatshops to museums. But also, as we do this, one of the things, kind of spoiler alert, what we're going to look at is the placards in museums and the narratives that they're presenting there, and they're different colors. And so I'm trying to keep that theme here with this. So in the slides today, when there's a purple hue or design with that, that's the research that we're going to be talking about. But then, I'm a professor, so there's also going to be some homework and assignments associated with this lecture. And so anytime there's green, it's going to be a student aspect. And part of what I wanted to do is when you leave today, not have just like trivia answers, like, if you're at trivia night, that you can answer specifics about this research, but also to guide you through the research process, so that because this was something that kind of I stumbled upon research-wise, and I got super curious about, and I'm sure you'll have the same experiences. And so hopefully it will equip you with a couple kind of pro tips. So how do you go from I'm really curious about that to studying it systematically? So that's that. When we see those two, that's what we'll be dealing with today. So like Stan said, I'm the director of the Project Evaluation Assessment Team, and what we do is we train students to do evaluations with nonprofits. And we've worked in 28 different countries. We've done everything from poverty alleviation to malnutrition to education programs. It's a really fun program, and it's something I really enjoy doing, and I do consulting on the side with this a lot. And in the evaluation assessment world, we know there's often good intent. These programs, these nonprofits, they want to do some positive thing. They want to get rid of poverty. They want to improve educational outcomes. But intent isn't enough. And so that's where the assessment comes in, is the intent leading to the desired outcome? And so that's how I kind of look at the world a lot of ways, is there's intent, and is it getting to the outcome, and then, then eventually to the magical word that we like to use, impact. But part of that, I was using this evaluation kind of way of thinking about things, and was doing research on labor standards this is another great research agenda you should do as well, on chocolate artisan production networks, chocolate and coffee artisan production networks in the Netherlands especially. So I was interviewing farmers around the world, as well as there's roasters and producers, and then like international fair trade and a lot of third-party certifications, those little logos that are on packaging are in the Netherlands. So I was doing this research there, meeting with people, and And you could go into the bookstore and pick up one of these candy bars, chocolate bars, and you read the back, and it'll tell you some story about the farmer, right? This is this family, they've lived in this valley forever, the cacao beans come from this beautiful valley, right? And the narrative that I was getting time and time again about why people are using this logo or this labor standard and this quality of life, even from the farmers, is this is a story we want to tell. We want the consumers to know about me. The farmers wanted to know with the bean to bar. They want that you end consumer, to know about them and their livelihood, and that they make a difference. And it's not just some just delicious chocolate bar, but there's real people behind it. And it was something I heard time and time again, every part of the production network, from end consumer down to farmers, whether that was in South America or Africa. This is a story we want to tell. And so while I was on my sabbatical in the Netherlands working on this, we went to this museum. This is actually my partner's right there in the front. That's Jen up in the front there. The Martens House, right? So we lived in The Hague. This was kind of near our apartment. And this is an amazing museum. So Johan Martens was a governor, and he collected all this amazing art. The girl with the pearl earring, if you know that painting, it's in this museum. It's fantastic. It's really great. So we were there, and we're one of those like families that love the museum. So like when we're planning our trip, it's like, well, that's 8 hours. What else are we going to do today? So we love museums a lot. And while we were in the Martens house, we were walking in, and Johan Martens, great art collector, but also slave owner. His money came from owning sugar plantations and other thing. And guess what they had on the wall of the museum? This is a story we want to tell. And that's when I started thinking about this in a new way. I was like, wow, like this is the same thing I'm hearing. This need to have these stories, these needs to understand like the origins of this, that there's a complexity to all this. It's not just a chocolate bar. It's not just a museum. There's a whole lot more complexities to this. And so I started reading this, and there's a lot of really cool work on this. People from anthropology, from curation, lots of different backgrounds are doing very, very cool work on this. Even Marvel's Black Panther, like Warmonger, right? He goes to the British Museum and he's like, no, that one's Wakanda. That's the same kind of idea, recognizing there's a colonial legacy to all these things. So if Marvel's doing it, I can do it, right? So I was reading all this stuff too, and I was just trying to think about, okay, so there's this cool work, what can I do, right? So I have this skill set of evaluations and sociology and this deep love of museums. And so how do these all kind of go together? Is there a little nuance where I can bring these together and bring a new perspective on what's going on? And so that was the general idea with this. And with all of this, too, is colonialism is embedded in all this. When I'm working internationally, colonialism is a big part of this. So for Pete, this last year, we were in Bolivia. We were in Sucre, Bolivia, and we were doing this, evaluating this after-school program for kids. The kids were from low-income houses. They would go get help with their homework. They would go get nutrition, these other things. These are kids who are Quechua-speaking kids. Guess what language the after-school programs was in? Spanish, right? So that's a colonial legacy we've got to grapple with. Is this appropriate that the after-school programs, all their education is going to be Spanish in a different language? What is that going to mean for their households? And so even in these areas where I'm working and doing other things, this colonial legacy idea is still there, still present. It's something that you have to kind of have on your to-do list. Have I checked that off? Have I thought through that process? And so it's this kind of framework that led me to start to think about, well, what could I do systematically? What could I do sociologically to try to understand this thing, right? We're not here to talk about paint pigments and brush strokes and framing and composition, but what can I do with my skill set? How can I help elucidate a new little facet of this area? And that's okay, so green, remember greens for students? Or the how-to. So that's what I want you to try to start thinking about. What I love about the Kennedy Center especially is you get these interdisciplinary opportunities to hear ideas from different backgrounds. It's not just your major or just your minor. And at BYU, we've had this new emphasis too on spiritual ideas, how they enhance and amplify our intellectual learning. The same things can happen here. What you're learning from these lectures, from your other classes, hopefully creates your own kind of mosaic. And what's really cool, the fun part, is often when these interact, is when we're doing these like kind of small little niches where we get this look at things in a new way. You have a unique skill set. You have this really cool way you're thinking about the world, your experiences, how what you're learning at BYU coupled with your testimony can help you think and engage in the world. And that's what I really want you to kind of get out of this too, because that's kind of what this was. This project was super fun. I love it, but it's not labor. It's not rural development. Right? But it still was cool, and I learned a lot from it, and I hope you'll find interesting as well. So I decided to do the Netherlands, right? So part of it, I was there, I saw what was going on, but the Netherlands also is trying to be very active in addressing their colonial legacies. And these are just some newspaper or news articles like from BBC, Guardian, New York Times. If you just Google Dutch and colonial legacies, a whole bunch of things are coming up. And they're actively trying to engage with this. And then in addition, like we saw at the Martis House, there was these specific efforts in the museums to try to address this. And new and unique ways to do that. So this to me sets up an ideal kind of type to look at this. Let's go look and see what the Netherlands are doing as a way to kind of understand if this is the best efforts, how does that then compare to some other ideas, right? And so that's how I got started to do this project in the Netherlands. It actually started off as an assignment in one of my classes, and my students liked it so much, they said, hey, you should do more on this. And they actually brought the research call from the Kennedy Center to me and said I should fill out the grant because they thought the assignment was so cool. So go tell your professors when they're doing cool work, and maybe you can get on a slide in the Kennedy Center one day too, right? So, so that's how this came out. It's like this is this really cool area, all these things coming together. I'm already there doing work. Let's try. What can we do systematically to do it? And so this is what was going on at the Netherlands and some of their museums. So this is just a still life, right? This is Hera. And really, you know, most of the time you're going to look at this and you're going to talk about light composition and how just amazing the different textures are and the reflections and all these things. What the Dutch museums were doing were adding these additional texts, right? So you have, this is what you would have traditionally, explaining kind of the artist and what's going on, and then you have additional texts that talk about the colonial legacies associated with that. And this is the program I'm specifically looking at. So what's the best of the best? So there's 77 different pieces that we're looking at. We're examining these kind of texts and try to understand how does this additional text lead to an improved understanding of colonialism, and is it meeting that intended outcome, right? Just like we would look at a poverty alleviation program, there's intent there, but is it resulting in the outcome we want to do? And you can see this one is actually talking about, you know, salt and slavery, and it's because you've got some salt here. So again, I wouldn't know what this is unless the museum presented it for me. And the other great thing about looking at this is literally curated. This is the museum putting what they want you to see, what they want you to know about. So again, it's this ideal type that allows us to look at what is, when everything we know is going on, they're conscious of these words, what is it they're really doing? Are they meeting all the goals? Are their voices being left out? And so that's what we're going to look at with this research. And think about this too. You do the same things. You curate your social media, right? What you put out in public for your Facebook or your Instagram that your mom follows is different than what you put out on Mutual, right? There's a different text and ideas. And so this is really important to see what's the best case scenario. What are people trying to do to engage in situations where it's an ideal type? And I think that's important for you to understand too with your research or interest in areas. The location you're choosing for your case study matters. Why are you doing this case? Is it the best case scenario? Is it an ideal type? That's what I think the Netherlands allows us to do in this situation. Is it the worst? We're going to see how bad can it get? Was it the first one to do it? Having some explanation associated with why you're working in an area is really powerful. It can actually add elements and new dimensions to your research as well. So when you're thinking about this, when you're doing study abroad, or you're thinking about doing a senior project in a country, thinking about why that location, and it's perfectly acceptable to say, I speak the language. Right? That's a perfectly acceptable one, or I serve my mission, I have a deep love of that area. But recognizing why you're choosing an area can help shape the story and the research you're looking at in that area. Okay, so specifically we're looking at here is we're going to be looking at the new stories, the new narratives that are unveiled in this project. What is added to the average user's experience with these new placards there, right? And what can we learn from this to help other museums potentially and compare to them? And then how can it, in the end, are there ways to improve this? Again, so the intent associated with these programs to elucidate and talk about colonial legacies versus the actual outcome. And we're going to use Gramsci's theory of hegemony to look at this. Now, Gramsci is one of the coolest people ever, right? So most sociologists, they probably have like a cat named Gramsci, or they're using Gramsci as like a password for one of their email accounts, Or if you're not at BYU, you probably have a massive back tattoo of Gramsci, right? So he's really cool, and this is a great basic way to start thinking about the world and power dynamics. So he sets up these two ideas of hegemony and subaltern, right? So the hegemony is the dominant group. It's who gets to dictate what's being said, who has the power to control the stories, and the subaltern group are who are marginalized, who are oppressed, whose voices aren't being heard. And so this is, for what we're going to do here for this analysis, is a great theory for us to start thinking about these things. What voices are there? What voices are missing, right? And this is one that I think, again, Green, for you, right? This is such a great tool to think about. I love sociology because when I step outside the classroom, I'm still using sociology, right? Think about all the different power dynamics that you engage in and how Gramsci might help you think about those in new ways. Who in your apartment is the hegemonic, powerful voice, right? Who's the person when they're ordering pizza doesn't get their topping? They're the subaltern, marginalized voice, right? We can use these in so many different ways, and that's what, again, is so great, is if you think about these skill sets, these filters that you can get at BYU and start using immediately. I think about power dynamics all the time. I think about hegemony. It's like it's the third word of my thought every single day. It's like, just what's the hegemonic power going on right now? I think about this all the time, and it's really great. It's a big plus on dates. People love to hear hegemony. Now, you should do one of those define the relationship things first, because people might get confused and think it's a proposal because it's just such a cool word. But you can use this all the time, and that's what I want you to do. Start thinking about going out in BYU, going out on your classes at home. Start thinking about where are the power dynamics? Where are you situated in those things? This is why you take these GE classes, is to empower yourself to be able to describe your world around you and know how you can engage with it. So we're using hegemonic and subaltern just to talk about who gets their story told and whose stories still aren't there, right? We have the first placards of the museum, whose stories are being told there, dominantly European, and the new ones, more an effort to talk about non-European and colonial experiences, right? And we're using a sociological process called content analysis, where we just basically systematically go through and we start looking for these things. Is there a pattern? And we're doing this as a team, so it's not just me, I think it's there. We're triangulating all of our coding, looking for certain ways, certain verbiages, certain stories, certain narratives that we might see. So for example, when I first did this, I just pulled 4 paintings for my PEAT students to do as an assignment so they could practice doing content analysis and assessing things as an assignment. That wasn't systematic. That was just me randomly pulling 4. It didn't necessarily tell us what the whole program was doing or how we can think about this in other museums. So by doing a full content analysis of the 77 exhibits, that's where we can learn. So spoiler alert, it worked. It was a great program. So here's some of the major findings. We'll go through some of these things. So there's an increased recognition for marginalized voices. By consciously trying to talk about more people and different backgrounds, the placards amplify the experience of not just of colonial Europeans, but of other people who were part of the colonial empires. There's more of a historical narrative that gives a balanced approach. So instead of just talking about this king won this battle and then this king came about, there's more of a story about the people behind it. What was the economic drivers associated with it? A critique of the colonial exploration or exploitation as well. We gain a lot. I got examples for each of these to go through this, to understand that colonialism just wasn't this, grand adventure, that there was real human cost associated with it, and a better understanding of the dominant and subaltern or marginalized voices in it. So the first one here is recognizing marginalized voices. When we go through, there's only one instance in the original placards where you're talking about a non-European or a subaltern voice or experience in those. Whereas when we look at the new ones, there's 22 different situations where there's a marginalized voice or subaltern person addressed. So this gives you a good example of it. This is the text for the original placard, right? The non-colonial placard one. And I'm not an art historian, but even you can see for the composition, there's an enslaved African individual right here, and even they're marginalized artistically as well, right? So we have them, and all this is talking about is the gold and the wealth associated with Fort Elmina, right? And there is a recognition here of an enslaved person in this painting. That's all we get from just the original placards, or about talking about marginalized and other populations. Whereas this is the new one, right? Young men, it directs it. We learned that not only is this the gold thing, this is this fort, but that fort was the center of human trafficking and the slave trade in the Dutch Empire. Over 500,000 people were sold through that, and it's an awful situation, including breaking up of families and branding people and the atrocities associated with the slave trade. That alone radically can transform your experience. Right? If that was the first thing you saw, and that was the only placard you saw, that would change how you're going to engage in the museum. You're going to start thinking about these things in different ways, maybe looking for more marginalized people. Again, this is a great example because if we weren't brought to our attention, we might miss that person altogether, the enslaved person in the background altogether with this. And so this is just an example of how this enriches your experience and how they've successfully tried to increase marginalized voices. So increase the historical narrative as well. We don't get, I didn't study European history. Sorry, Rob. I was an Asian studies minor, Mark. So I don't know a lot of European history, and I'm a sociologist, so I'm like bred to hate hierarchy, and so I never really liked European history. So when I would go to these museums, a lot of times there'd be this king and this king and this king, and I think, man, I hate Bridgerton. I don't want anything to do with the aristocracy. I just want to know about the workers. And so a lot of times the history isn't there. There isn't this other voice, what's going on beyond the hierarchy, behind the royal courts in some of these museums. But with the additional placards, we gain a lot more history associated with what's going on. And this is a great example. So here's two portraits that are in this Dutch museum. And the initial one you're going to talk about, these are marriage portraits. This is a wealthy family from Amsterdam, and they're talking about how fancy their clothes are, and look at those kicks, right? Man, those are better than Jordans, right? They even talk about this kind of how fancy his shoes are and everything, and then they talk about the things. So in the original placard, what we're left with is this idea about wealth and status, and this legacy of being in this high elite class. The revised placard helps us to know, you know what, all that was paid for because of slaves on a sugar plantation, right? That changes the narrative. It changes the legacy. It changes how I engage and think about those people portrayed there, right? And we've gone through similar things in the United States recently, grappling with history and slave ownership and how those legacies change when we know about certain histories. So this is a really valuable experience for an observer at a museum, and then shows again the success of some of these placards. So to critiquing the European exploitation, there's less of this occurring, but we gained some insights into European and non-European life. So just beyond what we're seeing, they're projected there, but what's the day-to-day lived experience? How are these pieces humanizing? And here's an example of it. So this is like a diorama that's there. And this is the original text. It's talking about this Dutch trading post that was in Japan that helped to eventually open up European trade into Japan, right? So this is what we see here. These are one of those things where I'm like, well, where's Mona Lisa? I'm not going to stop and look at this diagram. A lot of people might just walk past this. But with the placard there, right, we gain a whole lot to it. Like this is by forced labor, right? Not only that, we gained a personal insight of how Europeans viewed slavery, right? So the quote here, slaves are difficult and costly fortune, but one cannot do without them, right? So we gave an insight again to the cultural, the lived experience associated with people there. This actually hit me too when I think about it. Whoops, wrong button. There we go. Okay, that 1828 is when enslaved people were actually given identification or recognition as being human under Dutch law, right? That humanizes this experience to me. It adds a lot more to this, and also for me, when I was doing this, it makes me think about, well, I'm American. When that was before us. Wow, that really changes my experience associated with these. So overall, when we look at this, we can see that there's an intent to make a difference, and it's really clear that just the additional of these placards, a simple program, has a big impact with it. And maybe you were able to see the difference with this as well. But let me provide a few. Program evaluation wouldn't keep getting money if we didn't tell what's going wrong, why they need to hire us back next year. So let's talk about some of the improvements that we can do with this program too. So part of the thing that was interesting to me is why these 77. And I met with a curator and I talked with other people, and it was never 100% clear to me why they picked these 77, other than they were emblematic and help to do it. But like if we had those portraits again earlier of the cool shoes, right? You could turn around. There's a portrait on the other wall, and there's no additional plaque to that. There's no explanation why this family or that family. I even like would Google like maybe they're slave traders, you know, like the name of the person in the other portrait, but it's no clear with it. Again, selection matters with your case studies and your data, and just having some sort of explanation helps us to understand that these are just ideal types. These are just helpful. We don't know other people. It's subjective. We don't know 100% if they were that way. Some sort of additional information would help validate their selection. There's still, even though there's an effort to improve the historical narrative around marginalized groups, especially enslaved people and colonial subjects, they're largely commodified in the text. What I mean by that is when they're talking about them, they're talking about it as labor. They're not talking about it as human beings. By and large, that's the narrative. Even in some of the examples you showed here, it talked about, 550,000 enslaved people being sold. It's a commodity, it's a transaction. We lose a human element to that as well. And there's also it's homogenized as well, where the Dutch had a global empire, and a lot of times when the text, even in the colonial text, we're talking about a similar experience. So the people in Indonesia, that's a really different experience than the people in Suriname, right? And they were the text kind of treats them all the same as either colonized people or enslaved people. And so having more of a robust or a diverse understanding of the difference of the colonial experience would help improve it as well. And it's also still largely gendered. There's still very little discussion about the female component to it. So a lot of this is driven through a male perspective. Now, this is curated again. So these are just decided that we're going to pick these 77. It's not necessarily a representative, or we have to do it for every piece, or because there may not be there. I understand that there's sometimes limitations, but you can curate a story. You could probably find a historical narrative that includes a female perspective on it, that includes an Indonesian perspective on it. That would greatly improve the intent and the outcome of this program. Okay, so this should be green. I'm sorry. So this is a homework. Let's see if you can do this with me. Okay. One of the things that I think was interesting about this that can be improved is this is the original kind of placards we had from that first still life. It's still done in hegemonic colonial language. Now, I tried to sound smart and academic. Somebody help me interpret what I'm meaning by this. So this is the plaques. If I'm going to go to these museums, this are the plaques, and this is how I have to interact with the pieces. Any ideas what we're getting at here? Right, exactly. So if I'm Indonesian and I want to go see the history of my people and I fly all the way to the Netherlands, I still have to engage in a colonial legacy. This is just like the idea in Bolivia. How are we engaging with these colonial legacies? An example of how this can be done differently is Pete was in Rwanda 2 years ago, and this is a press release. You're not supposed to take pictures in the genocide memorial, so this is the best picture I could find. In a press release of the genocide memorial in Kigali. And what they've done is they have Kinyarwanda Rwanda, and in French, and then English. And it's not only hierarchical, the font size is different, right? So when I first went there, I was like, what? I'm an American. Why do I have to squint and read the bottom line, right? But after the end, it had a real impact. By the end, it's like, oh, wait, this is the Rwandan memorial. Right? And everything's through their lens, through theirs. That's the priority. And then other French, English could do it. Now, the museums wouldn't have to do this for every piece, but a piece that specifically addresses a particular culture can include a hierarchy of language in this way to help address those colonial legacies of language. Okay, great. Okay, so one of the things we're doing, I want to highlight too, is that the Netherlands is still, this is an ideal. They're doing a lot, and it's really good compared to some of the other places. One of the things we're working on is to take what we're seeing here in the Netherlands, and then we're going to compare it to some Belgian museums. And we've identified pieces that are similar in a way to be able to compare that. Again, an ideal type to a different type. Belgium's similar, the museum's similar time frame, funded the same kind of way. So this is what we have. If you remember that painting we had with the enslaved African in the background at the fort, it at least, even without the colonial placard, it talks about enslaved person as opposed to enslaved African is the term used in that one. This is a similar painting, similar period in a Belgian museum, and they have it just here, a servant is holding up a mirror, right? It's 1661 was when this painting was. I'm fairly confident that that wasn't a wage servant, but that was likely an enslaved person. And even just that narrative alone, like some of the terminologies, is a crucial and an ongoing debate in the curation world. Should we talk about enslaved person versus servant or slave? The idea for an enslaved person is that you're recognizing there's still human in that, and that's not their sole identity. But again, I just wanted to point out that even with some of the limitations, the Netherlands is still leading this from what I can tell so far, or at least from our preliminary comparisons, is doing an excellent job at trying to address some of the colonial legacies. Okay. Did you watch infomercials like I did as a kid? But wait, there's more. Okay. So that's what we got here. But wait, there's more. Does anyone remember? This is the same painting from beginning. This is the painting. This is a picture of the painting I took this June after I got the funding to go back and to try to do this analysis. Anyone notice anything different? What's that? Yeah, the placard, the colonial legacy placard is no longer there. You can kind of see there's there's a terminology of whitewashing history where they've literally painted over where those placards were. And now if you go, the placards are no longer there. It was a short-term period, just a few years is when they were doing this. And so it's all kind of lost associated with that, which I think is super fascinating. So let me just kind of give an example. So here's this silver bowl in the museum that normally, maybe you stop and look. Here's what's there, right? It's talking about the Dutch victory over the Spanish and how they were able to get all this silver and this wealth, and that helped continue to pay for their colonial wars. Right, but that's all you get. You lose this whole idea that actually the silver from this funded the purchase of Portuguese Brazil, Suriname, contemporary Suriname, and the transportation of 25,000 enslaved people. Right, that's a massive thing that's lost. And again, there's no signage that said, "Hey, come over here and you can still get it." And so to me, that's super fascinating. Just as a program perspective, you have the successful program, and we're not going to have it anymore. We're going to take it away, which leads to this idea called moral licensing, which I think is super fascinating. With the idea of that, well, we did a good thing, so we're done, right? And this is potentially even more dangerous in this narrative, right? So this idea of how could I be sexist? I have a wife and daughters. Right, that's moral licensing. The same thing. I'm good here, so therefore I'm good all over the place. And this is in psychology, but when we think about this in the course of this museum and hegemonic powers, right, this might be this idea of like, oh, we did that, we're done. No more legacies of colonialism. That was a 2020 thing. We've handled it, and that might lead to further entrenchment of these historical inequalities, and even potentially even a digression of the progress was there. Just by the what we saw today, like it really changes how we interact with those. Just a handful of experiences, even if you just had one or two of those up, that would change or prime a viewer on how they might engage in a museum. But this is a potential area that's, I think, really troubling in some ways and interesting programmatically why they would do such a thing to pull these things, especially when it's really not costing all that much. It's just a little wall space for these additional plaques associated with it. A counter argument of this could be that you can find it online, but again, how many people whoops, wrong button again. When you go to these museums, they'll have these numbers. You can go and you can type in, you can find additional information. But for the average viewer, if we're trying to make real change for a general population, the average viewer is not looking up every painting and doing the app and doing their homework. They might stop and read the placard. Oftentimes, the average viewer at a museum is just walking through, stop. You take the selfie with the Mona Lisa, and then you move on to the next thing, right? And so this is a low-cost, high-reward program. But has been that there's a danger of actually having a more negative long-term impact because of moral licensing associated with it. So our next steps for this project is we want to continue to compare the Dutch museums to the Belgian museums, and then my co-author Michael Cope did his work, grad work in Louisiana, and this idea of how does this look across countries. If we went to the Slavery Museum in Liverpool, we went to a Slavery Museum in New Orleans, we went to a Slavery Museum in Accra, what's the narrative we're getting there? How do these stories change across, especially when we're talking about a former colony? Do they change because now that they have more control over the narrative, are they talking about it differently than the colonial powers associated with that? Okay. All right. Last thing, here's the homework for you. Okay. What's the name of this mountain? I'll give you a hint. It's right outside the window here. Kive Peak. Anyone know other names? Squaw Peak, right? So there's two. So this is where I want you to think about what we talked about today with hegemonic powers and colonial legacies, and recognize we're still swimming in it, right? That there's this background to it all the time. And what I'd like you to do is, on your own, go look up the story behind Squaw Peak and try to identify the hegemonic and the subaltern voices in that narrative, and how the mountain got that name. And then go look up how it got changed to Kive Peak. What's the hegemonic voices? Who's the subaltern voices? Who's the dominant? Whose voices are heard, not being heard? And what is lost during that name change? And is there a moral licensing, or is there some other problem occurring when we go through this and when we're changing the narratives associated with these things? So you should be able to do this, hopefully, through what we talked about today. Again, Gramsci's your best friend. He's super cool, and great date idea. Go to the creamery, get some Peach My Gospel, and break down the hegemonic narrative around this mountain. Okay, that's what I've got for you today, and open to any questions.
Thanks, Scott. Really compelling analysis here. Okay, yeah, we will have questions for you. We have some time here, about 20 minutes. We'll go until 1 p.m. What we will do is we have some microphones for you. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Wait for the microphone to come so everyone can hear the question. And please, if you're a student, tell us who you are, what you're studying, or if you're a faculty member or someone else, just tell us a little bit about yourself so Scott gets to know you a little bit, and then ask your question. We know some of you may need to leave for class at 1 o'clock. If you do, that's fine. Yeah, so maybe, Scott, I could start. Just a curiosity, did you ever get an explanation from the Dutch Museum why they removed the placards? Was there anything from that?
Yeah. So they have ongoing programs, and they're trying to highlight different facets of it. So, and they're trying to push more things through the app. They think that's more impactful. So if you go, or if you download their app, they have a narrative now where you can follow women. It's a course through women. It's not colonial, but it's women. And so they're trying to do this rotation on topics, and so that hopefully over an extended period of time, their idea is that they would be able to address multiple topics. Their experiment with this, they phrase it as an experiment, is to see what worked, what didn't work, and then they're assessing it, and they might potentially revise the standing placards to incorporate some of the colonial verbiage. But that's yet to be done. And I think I think it's really interesting and one to kind of follow, given our contemporary sways and winds around diversity right now, not just in the Netherlands, but in the United States and other places too. So it's again, I think it could potentially be a positive that, we learned these things, let's make this a permanent facet of it, but it also could just be something that, we tried that, and now we really need to focus on this other aspect, and it all falls away. Other questions?
All right. My name's McCrae. I was a sociology grad in 2010, so I go way back. But I was really interested. So the staff that were creating these additional plaques, I'm assuming they were the curatorial staff. What sort of background did they have? Do you know of any in regards to sociology, anthropology, history? Because I would think creating something like that would be daunting, and how best do they represent that? And to have it be a sustainable thing, what was the background of that creation?
That's a great question. So let me give you just a thought process on how I try to approach this. I tried to stay kind of as neutral or naive to that as possible, so the evaluation would be more like, what is the average person? What is with that? So I I don't know. This is a very prominent museum. I'm sure they've thought through these things. They have an online journal, and I read a bunch of articles where people are writing about these things in very thoughtful and academic ways. So I'm sure this just wasn't like, let's order pizza and over lunch produce 7 placards. I'm sure it's very, very conscious, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to assess it. Is the assumption is this world-leading museum in a country that's trying to take the lead on this, they're probably going to be very mindful of what words they do, like enslaved person versus servant. They're probably more mindful of those things. And so then I wanted to just come and see from my evaluation standpoint, okay, here's your mission statement. Are we seeing that outcome? But you could certainly, it wouldn't be hard to do to look up the board and the curators of the museums in the Netherlands to see the kind of background that they have.
My name is Lauren Moon. I'm a neuroscience major with a minor in global women's studies. And so that part really interested me when you were talking about women and highlighting their role. What ideas do you have about how to highlight women in museums, like let that perspective be there when we don't have as many records from the perspective of women?
Yeah, that's great. And that's one of the challenges of these museums is the record was created by hegemonic forces, and they created the hegemonic history. But what this program is it's not representative in that it's 40% of everything that's in the museum has a plaque, and it's curated, and so that's what they can do is they can find, even if they have only one female history, credible source, they could at least share that and say we don't have, and there's some of the placards that will say that we don't know very much about this, but we speculate this, right? But that's one thing that I kind of from a gender perspective, is that you could just consciously choose to incorporate one or more stories. The collections themselves are largely male dominated, but the ones that are female, they could potentially provide. And even if like that diorama is a great example, that could be a case where if you had some sort of local narrative or female narrative or a family narrative, it could be added to a piece like that, where you're just saying this is where they lived, and here is a story of the enslaved families that lived there. That's a great question, though. Yeah.
Hi. I just had something to add to that. I was thinking about when we went on our study abroad, and they had that one. They had a really cool. They did the gender thing in a really cool way in one of the museums we went to. I can't remember which one it was, but they had the little audio tour guide thing that they do a lot in Europe, and they had different options. Like one of them was you could just do like the most popular ones, and they had one option where it was you could do a women specific one where it just took you through like the art that was done by women or portraying women, and it was like very specific, and you could just select that. So it wasn't everyone who came through the museum would choose that, but if you were interested in that, you could. So kind of like not the best case scenario, but a middle path, like working in the right direction. It was cool.
Great. So let's work. That's a great example, and I think I actually did that actual like path through the museum. But let's think about this. There's pros and cons to approaches like that. If we push it to an app, what's the benefit to the museum? What's that? We could change it. It's accessible to people. We could do different languages a lot easy. We don't have to worry about like a wall that's got 17 different plaques about different stories and different colors. So it's very much more user friendly, and maybe audiences are becoming more adapt to that. That I know I'm gonna go to the Louvre. I'm gonna download the app. I've got my earbuds. I can go through it on my own, right? The downside is, and this would be something like I'd be super curious from an evaluation standpoint, is what's user rage? Are more people willing to stop and read a placard versus that? Because there's a lot of information if you do the app. Like I said, we're one of those families that are weird and spent 8 hours at the museum. So we're always like plugging in every number we can find and listening to stories. And if you listen to it backwards, it tells you Beatles lyrics, right? So we love that, but that may not be the average experience. And so if the idea is to maximize impact, what in a contemporary setting might be, and that would be a curation question. I'm not going to claim that, but all these, like there's these museums that they have tensions, right? Even if there is this great way we could do it, there may not be funding. There may be political pushback. There may be just logistic problems on how it's done in the museum. So I love those ideas, and that's where, again, you have license now to go start looking at these your own way and thinking about it from a global women's standpoint. How does this change the narrative if I have to go to the app? Does it? Or does it enhance it? Those are all ways that you can start engaging on your study abroads and your classes now to be thinking about these things, because that's kind of the genesis of this project to me, is I was there, this is cool, and then just planted this bug that I just couldn't stop thinking about for a while, and I wanted to finally start to systematically study it. So I think that's great, yeah. Let's go here, and then, because she hasn't had a chance yet. Is that okay? Right here with the walk.
Oh, sorry. My name is Amelia. I'm an international relations major. This is the ideal case you kind of mentioned. Even so, was there any like political pushback or from the public? And if you think this was similarly implemented in the U.S., would there be more pushback, or how might that impact that?
Yeah, that's great. So, my read of the Netherlands is that this is something that the royal family is engaged in. There's lots of political movement, but there still are pushbacks. Like any society, you have a political spectrum, and so it's not always there. There's this always an idea or a voice that wants to just have, for lack of a better term, faith-promoting stories, right? That reinforce the narrative, the national ideal. The Netherlands just seems to be a country right now, by and large, and the government is willing to engage in these. If you look at the UK, for example, there was the big row where the Greek Prime Minister came in and called the Parthenon statues Greek, and then the UK Prime Minister wouldn't work with him, right? So there's different climates like that, and ideal may be too strong of a word, more progressive, but a great place to be looking for how is this getting done. That's where I think the Netherlands is a really good example. In the United States, I'm certain you would have it at a state level would be different if you were in a blue or a red state, and it's certainly from my perspective on DEI initiatives, we're seeing there was a push for more of them, and maybe there's starting to be a pull back of with them as well. So that would be, I don't know if it would be as robust or supported across the country in the United States.
Hi, I'm Audrey Rosenlund. I'm also an international relations major, and my question was kind of on the same vein, and this is niche, but did you ask them kind of how many people they had? Did they see an increase in visits at the museum during this time when they were highlighting these stories, or were there less people coming, just kind of public reaction to it?
Yeah, so I met with a curator, and that's how I actually was able to get all the placards. They gave me the text that had been there, and met with them a little bit. They wouldn't give me any data like that, and part of the issue associated with it is also pandemic. And so it wouldn't be a clean comparison because this went up in 2021 is when the program started. And so it wouldn't, you could argue there's a huge increase between 21 and 22, but it's probably more to do with pandemic than anything else. And then there's also, the revenge travel that has been building up the last couple of years, so that might skew your results if you're looking at just raw numbers of people attending. But that's a great way of looking at it. Is it attracting people? There are other ways you could get at that. They've done specific exhibits where you pay like the extra ticket, right? And that might be one way if you were really interested in that. You could see, are they more profitable or they're more popular, these specific side exhibits where it's like, I'm going to go see this exhibit about women, this exhibit about this experience. And I know they've had those historically too, and rotate those. Like there was one, Franz Hals was an exhibit, Vermeer was an exhibit, and the one before that was about life in Indonesia under colonial rule. So you could look at things like that. That's a good question, yeah.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm an art history major, and I was just wondering if the curators ever expressed, like with the removal of the plaques and not having that as much of a focus, could part of it have been that they like wanted the museum to stay focused on art? Just because I'm assuming with that museum, with like a lot of 17th, 18th century European art, it kind of all has aspects of colonialism in it, and probably every painting. So I wonder if that was ever an aspect of it, that they were like, we don't want this to be a museum to like come learn about colonialism. We want it to be about coming to learn about art.
Yeah, that's a great question, right? At the heart of like art history, what is the role of a museum? Should it be a public educator? Should it be preserving and restoring art? That's something I didn't ask. I think that's a brilliant question, but it's certainly, with your lenses and your major and everything, that's something you should be thinking about. What is the role of museum, and should some museums be proactive, or should some just be more historical, or how do we get that? Maybe that is something for the universities to talk about, gender and colonial legacies, and the museums strictly one. And I'm sure in the art history world, there's a spectrum of theoretical perspectives on that as well. But that's a really fascinating question, and I encourage you to look that up. There's probably a really great dialogue about that.
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm a public relations major with minors in history, sociology, and global women's studies. My question was on those temporary exhibits highlighting those marginalized voices. Do you think that's actually productive, or because the fact that they're temporary, that just because they're only highlighting for a certain amount of time, is that even effective in highlighting those voices?
Yeah, man, students have the best questions. That might actually be kind of interesting to look and see. You could do this through, this museum has a journal. And you could potentially just do a content analysis of the journal to see how the narratives of the published papers change. Do you see a progression where there's more? So one started it, and so there's more people talking about different aspects. So we talked about here, we need more of a gendered aspect of colonialism. Maybe that leads to that. Or do we see a moral licensing where it happened and then there's a quieting and it's a shifting away to just a strictly artistic interpretation of it? That's super interesting and a very easy, that should be your senior thesis right there. Just to go, but there's ways you can get at that, right? And again, that's what you see the world, you have these questions, and then you start thinking about how would I get data to answer these questions? What kind of experiments, what kind of assessment do I need to do to look at that? And that would be potentially one way. And that's the other thing. There's lots of ways to do these things. There's not just a single way of doing these things. But that could be a potential way where you're looking at this. And there might be other things in the art history world where there's other ways that you could assess or quantify how many voices are being heard and how many voices are being silenced, if we see trends. And I'm sure there are trends across these kinds of things. Rob?
It's all fun and games until restitution's involved. And restitution is a slippery slope till reparation, right? And the government suddenly finds itself that it's having to pay billions of dollars for the health care and future and building in places where it decimated the population. So do you see this fear and taking things up and down as trying to dam up the coming things? And you talked about the Benin bronzes, which Germany's sent back its Benin bronzes. Now the British Museum is thinking, do we really have to send back our Benin bronzes as well? And the Elgin marbles again, all of these things. And all of a sudden you see these museums in their minds being emptied out, which is awesome. It would be great if we could bring museums to the third world and bring their treasures back if it's done well, whatever. But do you see any of that hesitancy because it leads to first to repatriation and then to the idea that we really do owe a lot of money to the people that we enslaved for so many years?
Yeah, that's kind of adjacent. So in my international development class, I have an assignment on the Benin bronzes as a way to try to think about this through colonial narratives. And in preparing that assignment, I've read more about that, and this is where one of the things that in a Dutch press release was them apologizing for slavery, and that set up a big political pushback because then they were worried about liability associated with that, and that's, I think, a really interesting, at least my reading of it, is to see where people are recognizing versus apologizing versus taking steps to correct. And that's a whole other world, and I'm sure lots of smart people here studying that as well. But I think that's so fascinating, and even the whole Benin bronzes one is even more. The British Museum art book is a really great one. So the Nigerian bronze mask, that's what the poster was. The British colonials stole them, took them, acquired them, whatever words. Those are all politically charged words, right? And they're in the British Museum now. And then there's big debates about should they go back to Nigeria or not. If they go back to Nigeria, is it the Nigerian state or is it the Benin Kingdom of Benin? Like, it's really fascinating. So these colonial legacies, this is the thing, they're not just these one and done things. They're these really complicated, ongoing debates that we have. And again, it's not just European. There are ongoing debates about Kive Mountain and what are we calling the places we live here, and the treatment of indigenous populations in the United States. So this can be a really fun academic exercise, but it's also real world. It's happening all the time, and hopefully you'll be able to see this and engage in these and think about it, and do something about it. Become an activist, become a professor, become a curator, whatever. But engage in a way that you find meaningful with it. So.
One more question.
Okay, thank you so much. This is, like I said, this is a new research. I'd love to talk more about it. Thank you so much. This was really fun, and yeah, thanks.